Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Good to have so many of you with us as we kick off August already. A massive, massive welcome to you all, especially a number of new faces who are joining us today. You're very, very welcome. We run these every single week. This is the Social Housing Roundtable. We do this every single Tuesday at 11 a.m. This is episode 187, I believe. We've been running this now for about 3-4 years, and the idea behind it is to bring together the social housing community to discuss a different key theme every single week. Ideally generating discussion, a bit of debate, a bit of disagreement in a place where it's encouraged, it's welcomed. We don't just hear from the same side of the coin. We don't just hear from the same echo chambers. We're genuinely trying to see whether collaboratively we can make a difference, but also more importantly, how conversations can lead to those. My name's Matt Baird. I've been running this, as I say now, for, well, our first sessions were during the COVID pandemic in 2020, but really kicked off the last kind of 3.5 years. That's when we started doing these every single Tuesday. Day to day, I work in recruitment. It is my recruitment business that keeps this running and available for free for all. So if you are looking for recruitment support, please do reach out. But also a massive thank you to both CMSG and to Alertical, who are sponsoring the Social Housing Roundtable through 2025. Speaking of recruitment, I got to know the guys at HSPG through a recent piece of work we were looking at together. And through kind of those conversations, I got introduced to Guy, their CEO, who's going to come on today to talk about how and why maybe the temporary accommodation situation is where it's at in the country, and what we can do to really kind of change the narrative around that. But also, I guess more importantly, what we can be doing to really try and overcome the problems that we've got. Because at the end of the day, I mean, to those who don't know, some of the stats are absolutely appalling. But when we're looking at ways to prevent that, sometimes it's just the same things we've tried countless times over and over again that haven't worked, and we just kind of keep trying those same things. So hopefully Guy's going to bring a different perspective today and some thoughts on how we can stop bankrupting councils. So without further ado, Guy, it's wonderful to have you on the platform, and a huge welcome today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt. And it's amazing to see so many so many people on here. It's clearly a topic that people care lots about. And I think as it should. I'd probably just, because I can see a lot of faces here. So maybe it'd just be good before we even start, like, who here would say that they are affected by homelessness, just as a raise of hands? Who would say that they're affected by homelessness on a daily basis? They're impacted by homelessness on a daily basis. Okay.
Yeah, I can see quite a few hands going up and a few others that are on a few of the other pages. So it seems to be, unfortunately, something that's occurring more and more.
Yeah, and I personally, I'm impacted by it every day, not only because of the work that we're doing, but I live in central London, and it's very rare to walk from my house to the tube and from the tube to my office without essentially without coming across homeless people. And that might be outside the tube station, in the tube itself. And we're seeing the proliferation and the growth of homelessness. It seems to be bigger and unfortunately the worst it's ever been. And Matt, you kind of touched on it there, like the stats are appalling. The government, I think in London alone, the 32 local authorities in London alone overspent by £250 million on their budget last year. So imagine that you've got a whole budget and then you overspend by £250 million. It's just it's frightening. I saw a stat that 1 in 4 local authorities are going to go bust by the end of the year if the temporary accommodation spend is kind of where it is. So we know where we are, and we know that it's a problem that clearly a lot of people care about, which is why you're all here today, which is fantastic. So I think the question that we're asking is what can we do to try and solve it in a meaningful way? Like everything, there's probably not one rule, that one thing that will fix everything. But I do think that there are a couple of things that I think can make a big difference. From my personal perspective, a big thing that we are trying to eradicate is inappropriate nightly accommodation in huge hotels where hundreds and hundreds of people are living for years on end. Essentially, what's happening there, for people that aren't aware, is that individuals and families can get essentially lumped in hotels for years at a time. And I've heard of stories where families can be in hotel rooms, one hotel room for 7 years with no cooking facilities, and there's no support there. And essentially it's just a room. And I've actually walked through these hotels, and there's just delivery bags and delivery bags, and people don't really have a lot of money already, and to be spending money on that kind of thing is just it's not great. So a big thing that I think can really be a huge impact for the sector is converting nightly accommodation into appropriate supported accommodation, where people are receiving support for even to get into work, or to get into their own independent living. A big thing that we work on at HSPG is low level supported accommodation, where we're delivering even a few hours of support a week to individuals and families, can really begin a positive trajectory to understand what are their needs, how do they get themselves in the situation to begin with, and how can we then support. Once you understand people's needs and you have a conversation with them, then it's like, okay, well, what can we do based on that conversation to help them into independent living? And ultimately that's two things. It's a roof over their own head, and ideally to get them into work or education. And that's something that we're personally very, very passionate about. And I think that it's a great problem, because it's a great problem, a great way of solving the problem, rather, because you are getting them out of the system, the homelessness system, and you're getting them into the working system, into the education system, and into the living system. And we know from research that when people have a roof over their head and stable home, stable job, that's the foundation for stable security, and ultimately for people to live great lives and great lives in their community. Um, and I think, just to kind of recognize all the wonderful kind of faces that are here, is you know this is all about partnerships. To be able to deliver this meaningfully across the country, it's going to be about partnerships. We know that there's a big issue around Greater London. We know there's a big issue across the Midlands and across the Northwest. But this is an issue that actually plagues the country in all areas. And nowhere is exempt from that. And even if local authorities want to turn around, I've sat down with local authorities before, and they're like, "Yeah, we've not got any homelessness." I sat down with a Greater Manchester local authority not long ago, and they're like, "Yeah, no, we don't have we have zero homelessness," and we know it's not true. And even if we don't want to admit that there isn't a problem, we know that there is, and we can see it. And I think I think it's our responsibility to really build partnerships. And then once we can build partnerships, we can understand the needs of the residents that ultimately we're going to be supporting. And then from there, we can then create homes, create stability, and from there develop the individuals and develop the communities that we live in, and that we can impact. I think that's the big thing I would share as solution one, would be getting people out of nightly accommodation, out of hotels, and into some form of supported accommodation. And most importantly, where there is an ability to transition, as I said, into independent living, ideally target within a couple of years. It's not always going to be possible, but we know that if we can really seek to understand what are the needs of the individual, and then we can then try and support them best. And really, that's the responsibility of the housing provider and the support provider, is understanding their needs and being able to deliver the support as well they can. That would be kind of like my overarching sentiment. I think there are probably a few other ideas that I'm sure other people in this room will have thought and talked about as well. We've hardly seen LHA rise in a really long time. We know that rents have risen massively, astronomically, over the last few years. Inflation has been really strong. Rents have risen. LHA hasn't risen in line with that, and what we're seeing is landlords are essentially expecting a lot more rent than they were a few years ago. And LHA and obviously like Universal Credit and isn't able to keep up with the needs of that. And I think that we're seeing a huge dropout at the bottom there, where people just unfortunately aren't able to afford their rent. And people, rightly so, don't want to be displaced. They don't want to move out of the areas they're living in. They've got kids in local schools. They've got jobs where they are. So they're kind of like very, yeah, they're very entitled, in my opinion, to be living where they are and to continue there. I think that's a really, really positive way. I think they would be the two things that, if we could take anything away, would be those things. And I don't know the format, Matt. Is it worth
Absolutely.
sharing a bit about what HSPG do, or are the questions, or what's
Yeah, so we tend to. I mean, we can take it in a few different ways, and people run it in different ways. I think the important thing right now is to, like I say, lay out the conversation, which you've clearly done incredibly well, because I can see the chat has got a number of things coming through from it. Do you want to quickly explain what HSPG do and why? You know, obviously, I mean, we've talked before, and the roundtable is never a place for kind of going, oh, we do this or we do this. But I think it's important to understand why you are a specialist in this and where your knowledge and insight has come from. I think that will be really useful for the table to understand. So, talk to us a little bit about what HSPG do, and I guess how you've been able to combat some of the issues that you're talking about today.
Yeah, so HSPG is there to try and essentially alleviate homelessness and deliver more affordable housing. So we have two platforms that do both investment and development, and essentially management and partnerships in both the homelessness space, the supported housing space, and affordable housing. I think just to touch on the affordable first, and we'll move back onto homelessness. So we have a for-profit RP in our group, and we partner with local authorities, house builders, and essentially institutional capital to deliver more affordable housing. So we acquire from house builders. We're a Homes England investment partner, so we're able to buy Section 106 and some private units. We convert those private units to more affordable housing. We then deliver those housing. We've got a specialist sales team that work on doing really well to understand the needs of the shared ownership buyer. And of course, we've got a great management team that understand the needs of our renters. We work with top class managers to manage our affordable rent properties and make sure we're delivering a high standard of accommodation. And then we work with institutional capital to fund our investments. All the while really understanding the needs of the local authorities and making sure that we're trying to reduce the local authority waiting list. So that's that business. And the second platform is focused on alleviating homelessness, and as I said, we do that by focusing on the provision of low-level supported accommodation, understanding where is there a need from local authorities, which is again pretty much the whole of the country, going out, sourcing suitable accommodation based on what we understand is the needs of the residents in that local authority, acquiring the accommodation, delivering any amendments, any construction works that we need to make it suitable for the residents that they're going to be living in there. And then we manage the managers. So we understand that there are amazing housing providers and support providers across the country who are really good at their specialist needs. So it might be drug and alcohol substance misuse, or it might be prison leavers. It may be, so depending on vulnerable women with children, for example. So whatever the needs are, we have like different housing providers and support providers who essentially are there to deliver the support, and we target them, as I just mentioned, within 18 to 24 months, to support them back into independent living through education, work, and ultimately their own home. That's what, and then in addition to that, we provide kind of a management consultancy partnership service where we aim to increase those services on behalf of, whether it's a landlord, whether it's a local authority. So a lot of local authorities ultimately don't have the capability to ensure that high quality support is being delivered and that the properties are compliant and that it's being managed well. So we've partnered with a number of local authorities and actually gone and done that service where we're carrying out inspections on the properties. We're doing all the compliance checks. We're doing all the support compliance. We're making sure that the support is being delivered properly. We're engaging with the residents. So we provide that service as well on a partnerships basis for landlords, for housing providers, for institutional investors, for local authorities, RPs, support providers. So whatever it may be, we utilize our expertise. In terms of what's our track record, this month we hit 10 years as a business, which is fantastic. And we've housed 10,000 people. We've created 10,000 homes during that time, and overseen delivery of just shy of £1 billion into affordable and social supported housing over that time. We've got a phenomenal team of just over 50 people. With kind of 2 head offices in Manchester, right near Piccadilly Station, and in London near Holborn. But we've got a national presence across England. We've done a bit in Wales. We haven't been able to crack any markets outside of that yet, but we know the scale of the problem is so vast already in the areas that we are working in, and we know the addressable market. We're talking over 2 million people is our addressable market. So 10,000, we're just getting started. And we really understand and appreciate that the way for us to grow and the way for us to keep making meaningful impact is through partnerships. So yeah, really welcome these kind of conversations. And from this as well, anyone who wants to reach out thereafter, to be able to try and meaningfully impact the problem that we're all trying to solve together is like incredibly welcome.
Thank you very, very much, Guy. So, I mean, I can see an awful lot of points coming through on the chat, so I'm going to summarise some of them. But to those who are new to our platform, do feel free, if you wish to use the, there's a React, heart thing at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that and click raise hand, I'll absolutely bring you in. I'll summarise some of the points we've got coming through now, guys, so that we can get a feel for maybe some questions that are coming your way. And then if anybody wishes to dive in, we'd love to hear from you as well. So, Joe had said earlier, I've been saying this for years. Let's just let Rena in. I've been saying this for years. However, the response from local authorities is that the money comes from different pots, and therefore, even with proven massive savings versus temporary accommodation, it's not as simple as it sounds sometimes. RPs need the safety of a support contract, as often the needs are far more intricate than they appear. As someone who lives in Birmingham, I can absolutely tell you it'd be lovely if everything worked in unison and silo. But I think, rather than silo, but I think this is part of the problem, isn't it, guys, that we talk about partnership working. Sometimes it's that even local authorities themselves haven't got that kind of connective working that's required in order to solve this problem.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, right? Because everyone's got individual needs. Some people might need more support, some people might need less support. Local authorities don't always have the ability and the resource to be able to recognize how much support people need. And that's ultimately where it comes down to the skills of the housing provider and the support provider to try and make sure that they are delivering that. And if it means that you have to go back and say, well, actually, I need to increase someone's support here, it's about being really on top of that, and there are a lot of good housing and support providers out there. There's even more that are really well meant, but just because of it's not an easy job. It's not always delivered as well as we'd love it to be. But I think that it's a really good point.
Brian had said many of the issues in relation to homelessness have been the drive for home ownership alone and no focus on the provision of homes for everyone who needs it. It's got to be a two-pronged drive, building more homes and the focus on the provision of homes for social rent. We need to get away from this affordable tag. It's only affordable when you have the money in the first place. And this was backed up by a conversation and points made by Alicia, by Emma, by Claire. The current provision is so unfocused and often forces too many people with different needs under one roof. Emma mentioned what you said about individual needs. These are often overlooked, as in homeless people fit in a box and actually everyone's individual, needs some different amounts of support. And Claire said one of the issues is treating all people as one type of homeless. The solutions are as diverse as the underlying issues. Do we think sometimes it's just, the government the government point that comes through and this kind of thing of going homeless, which in itself is a huge misnomer in terms of the diversity of it,
yes,
is exacerbating the issue that we're in when we're talking about temporary accommodation, because a lot of people don't even see temporary accommodation as any form of homelessness.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on actually a really good point there around building enough homes. And and also I'd like to say what I think we are doing well at and we're getting better at is Homes England have done a really big push, and I'd like to celebrate that as well. There's been a really big push, a lot of investment coming into the space, and I think that we should celebrate that, and I think that the fact that there is a big push on there. Okay, we're really, really behind on housing targets, but I think we have to start somewhere. We've definitely seen in our business a big willingness from Homes England to really support us. It's really difficult. It's a really good point that we need to be delivering more social rent properties. I know that's a big, big push of this government and of Homes England. We probably will need more grant per unit to deliver more social rent properties, because it's so difficult to make the numbers work. We really, really try, and I'm grateful to say that some of our newer schemes that we're bringing through, we're delivering some of them with grant funding now with a social rent, which is fantastic, and it is rare in the space, and I want to celebrate Homes England for that, and also our team for being able to do that. And I absolutely agree that the more we can do there, the better. And I also think that affordable rent still isn't affordable for lots of people, but it is better than nothing. That's really what else can we be doing to be building more houses? I think it is a big supply and demand issue. We are a small island with kind of like limited space, and people want to live in certain areas, and therefore it is condensed. So I think there's definitely more work to be done on how can we build more houses. Obviously, there's a lot of planning reform coming in. It's still not working hard enough. I'm sure there's smart people in this room who've got some amazing ideas on how we could go about that. But I think it's a really good point raised, is like delivering more houses. It means that we've got more supply, delivering more truly like affordable accommodation as well. Shared ownership has grown massively over definitely the last 10 years. We've seen a huge increase in shared ownership, especially given Help to Buy ending. I think shared ownership's been a phenomenal product that people have really got behind. The education piece has been really, really good. There's still a big way to go there. We've got a phenomenal internal team who not only do our sales but also manage shared ownership, both our own stock and also other landlord stock, and they do a fantastic job there. And I think that people having positive experiences with shared ownership is really, really important. And I think the management of the shared ownership is just as important for the future as being able to deliver more accommodation, because the rhetoric about shared ownership, the fact that people are having good experiences there, is really, really important. I see a lot of BBC articles all the time from people living in huge tower blocks of shared ownership, and they're being lumbered with these huge bills and ground rents and service charges, and it's tarnishing what should be a really, really good space. We focus on suburban houses, so we don't have any of those issues really. But it's really, really important that the people who are living, even if they are in big London towers, that they're having really good experiences, that their housing associations are supporting them to deal with these issues, and also that there are government grants available, or whatever it may be, to be able to support people to make sure that they're not lumbered with these huge bills, and as much education as possible to make sure that people know what they're getting into. But I really think there's a big responsibility on the sector to manage these properties properly, so that when they go and speak to other people, they say, yeah, I'm in a shared ownership property and I love it because I'm paying rent at 2.75% and I can't get a mortgage anywhere near that, and it's interest only, and I'm able to acquire a property for double the price, or maybe even more, triple the price than what I could have done before. And what does that mean? That now means I can buy a 3-bedroom property when maybe I could have only got a 1-bedroom property before. And what does that mean? I can now have kids, I can now have a family, I can now build stability and build a foundation in my life, and actually hopefully people to actually use that as a stability. And we know birth rates are the lowest that they've been since records began in the late 70s. And I believe, and I know a lot of other people believe, that a big reason for that is because people don't have access to stable homes. People feel that then they're not safe in their rented homes because the landlord can hike up the price by 20% next year. Do you want to be moving house with a newborn, or whilst you're pregnant? Absolutely not. People can't afford to own their own homes, and so home someone's home is the foundation for that, and to be able to develop communities, to develop families, and for us to be living fulfilled lives, it really starts with our home. And it's these kind of things that we should be thinking about to be able to support people to be able to do that.
Thank you very much, Guy. Some of the other points that are coming through on the chat, just I'm waiting for the first person who's going to be brave enough to put their hand up and then come join us in the conversation. James had mentioned about Hacked and Fusion 21 are doing a lot of work to prevent homelessness via fuel vouchers and furniture poverty through funding and research. Sally had said, thankfully, the new social and affordable programme, which we launched in January 2026, will be focused on funding homes for social rent. The last couple of years of the current programme has focused on provision of social rented homes as well, so that's good to hear. With the point made by Ben, I work for a provider of both general rented and supported housing, including homeless provision. While we have some very successful throughput move on from many of our homeless services, some local authorities are reluctant to formally agree and establish move on processes or direct offers of future accommodation. This can result in people being stuck in services for extended periods with no bidding rights, or in worst cases, having to go through eviction processes and reapproaching as homeless, which we can all agree is a terrible cycle. We pushed hard to establish positive move-on processes to make best use of our homeless services and the fantastic support they provide people, but ultimately we bump up against the housing crisis. We're in the southeast, as often there simply aren't available properties for people to move on to, but we feel that pushing for strong move-on allocation agreements works to avoid people being placed in poor quality temporary accommodation. And I can see you nodding away there, Guy. Case Management Solution Group, or CMSG, are the home of React, the UK's #1 case management system for ASB and community safety. We are delighted to have them as one of our key sponsors for Social Housing Roundtable 2025 into 2026. And with the ASB app now fully integrated to the platform, it allows residents to record, monitor and report issues directly to their case office in live time. What's not to love? CMSG are bringing simplicity back to case management, and I cannot recommend them enough and thank them for all of their support through this period and through the rest of the year. Thank you, CMSG, and do please go check them out on social media and on LinkedIn. Thank you. Alert Call return as one of the keynote sponsors for the Social Housing Roundtable in 2025 into 2026, and we're delighted to have them back. Alert Call help as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. As you can see from this touchscreen I've got with me, Alert Call's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Call, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alert Call work with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and their landlords. In 2022, Alert Call won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023, Alert Call won Housing Supplier of the Year. We're delighted to have them back with us throughout the course of this year, and please do go check them out on social media and LinkedIn to find out more. Thank you very much, Alert Call, for sponsoring us again.
Yeah, it'd be great. And I definitely encourage as much work that we can do to deliver more move on accommodation, the more partnerships that you can create there. It's something that we at HSPG, it's going to be our 2026 new strand is private accommodation, and what we would love to see is how can we create an ecosystem where people can move out of homeless accommodation, supported accommodation, and move into our private accommodation. That's definitely an avenue. It's something that we've been talking a lot about. Some local authorities do it, but again, from my experience, there's limited resource there, and it's more like throw some money at it. Can I give you £2,000? Can I give you £1,000? Can I give you £3,000? Maybe up to £5,000 for certain. Or what I saw when I first entered the space, which I haven't seen as much of now, but I'm sure it still goes on, is can I put people on a train at Euston, and can I send them to you in Manchester, and can you house them in Oldham, and I'll give you £1,000 for doing that. And like, that's what we really want to prevent. Just people throwing money and then putting them on a train. It's we're trying to create stability here. So I think that's a really good point. And how can we deliver high quality move on accommodation to the person who made the point, to their point, it's like that stops the cycle. It stops a vicious cycle, because it stops them becoming homeless again, because they've got good quality accommodation that they can live in and hopefully thrive in.
Thank you very much indeed. James, I'm going to bring you in.
Yeah. Hello there, Guy. Nice to see you here. My thing is this: it's looking back at one of the knock-on effects that we had initially was what was known as the under-occupancy tax became known as the bedroom tax. So many people exited from the properties they were in. All of a sudden, they were downsizing. They couldn't afford or want the homes that they were in, because now there was this extra payment on top. Now, my concern now is the upcoming rent convergence situation we've got on the horizon, and sections 106 and the warm homes and all these ahead, the warm homes policy. And my question looking at that is, how many tenants now who are now being told they're going to be charged service charges that didn't get service charges before are now going to be wanting to do yet another debunk and decant and downsize and have a different property size, because they decide that this isn't supporting them. So further homelessness, I think, on the horizon.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the question is there, but I think it's a really good point, James.
The question is, do you think that this is going to have the knock-on effects, as I say, same as happened with the bedroom tax? Do you agree that with the rent convergence, the new 106, new home standards, the golden thread, are all these together going to have that knock-on effect?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. In the sense that the more bills that people are getting lumbered with, the less income people have to be able to spend on homes. As rents are increasing, we've seen a huge increase in bills, electricity and gas bills. All of these things ultimately are compounding. As I touched on earlier, we've not seen LHA shift in any meaningful way. In the last 10 years that I've been in the space, we saw one increase around COVID, and that's pretty much been it. There's costs are growing and growing and growing, seemingly exponentially. Inflation has been really, really high over the last few years, and ultimately people's income hasn't grown because wages haven't significantly grown, and LHA and isn't growing. So people don't have the resource financially to be able to spend money on it. So yeah, I think any additional cost, unfortunately, is just going to squeeze people more and more and more, and it's so squeezed already that unfortunately I think we're going to see more of the same. So what can we do? I always like to try and be as solution oriented. It is how can we grow LHA? I definitely would call for, whether it's a formal rent control, or whether it's the responsibility of social impact real estate investors to say, we are going to be acquiring private stock, and we're it's part of our mandate, it's part of our policy to only increase rents by X amount. For example, I think it's we've got rent policies internally, and we're very much customer focused, and it's just because you can hike the rent up by 15% because the one down the road has, it doesn't mean that you should, because then you're causing all of these issues. So I think it's a responsibility of social impact real estate investors, and that's the institutions, organizations like ourselves, and also I think RPs as well, to own private stock and to give the ability for residents for move on accommodation to live in private stock where they feel safe and they know that their landlord is a proper organization with good intentions, that has a very clear mandate that says, I'm not going to raise my rents by more than a few percent every year. And it gives them that stability, that security, because you don't want people to be 10 months into their tenancy agreement and to not know as well, like, is my rent going to be hiked up in 2 months' time? Like, that's not a safe and secure place for people to be. So these are the kind of things that we can be doing, and they're definitely things that we will be doing and would love, again, like, as much collaboration from other people who are keen to do that and create partnerships in that way.
Thank you very much, Guy. I'm just going, there's a point made by Ben, just follow up from the previous point, which is really that we think the reliance on Section 106 builds, where around 30% of a private development has to be affordable housing product, is kneecapping the building of the sort of housing that's really needed. If a housing association or council were able to build on the same land, say 100 homes as a land-led construction, then the same could be 3 times more helpful in addressing housing shortages. Probably a bit of a naive hope that the government would do anything radical about Section 106, however, but it's still an interesting kind of point based on what you said there. Sue, I'm going to bring you in. Good to have you with us today.
Oh no, so I'm going to go from the local authority's point of view. First of all, voids are taking much longer to turn round, and I think this is partly because landlords are worried about the regulator of social housing, so they're sort of trying to make sure they're meeting the decent homes before, you know, instead of doing work once somebody's in the property, if it can be managed that way. So I think that's partly why the voids are going longer in turnaround thing. I was looking at the homeless statistics for the last 3 years of my local authority, and I looked at the housing associations. Now, my local authority is really good at managing people in their properties. So we had 1 eviction in 3 years, and it's been like that for donkey's years. And yet the housing associations, they're evicting, and then those people are coming back to the local authority. I suggested you go and do a piece of work with the housing associations, how to sustain people in their tenancies, because basically if you don't do that piece of work, they're coming to your door. And the third thing local authorities could do is start building some accommodation that is for temporary accommodation, where it's a stepping stone until a property becomes available. Because if you haven't got I mean, we're paying vast amounts in hotels and people are making vast sums of profits, but it goes to waste. We need bricks and mortar. We need, and in fact, in my local area, I've actually suggested we have one of these built actually where I live. You know, so I'm hoping they're going to pick up that. We're actually even doing our neighbourhood plan, and we're hoping to actually put that into the neighbourhood plan as well. So it's coming from the residents of the village and the air and surrounding area that we want you to address this problem.
Thank you very much, Sue. Lucy, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's the whole cost of this area. I mean, when I was homeless 8 years ago, the local council were paying £1,000 a week for emergency B&B when I could have got a very nice flat for £800 a month. And one of the biggest problems, which is why I am interested in this, you know, housing associations possibly having access to more private rentals, is you know, when I was homeless, I contacted probably 100 different agents across the whole of East Anglia to try to find someone that would rent to me. I had just one property offer, and that was so poor that I refused to take it, which obviously led me open up to, you know, I was open to possibly being taken off the waiting list. You know, with the statistic just over the past couple of days is that, you know, 1.9 million council homes were sold, and now we have 1 in 6 private tenants living in what was formerly social housing. There has to be someone has to take some accountability for what I consider to be a very poor decision in the first place. I think if you want your own home, it shouldn't be done through buying a council house with a 46% discount. It should be perhaps better help getting mortgages. And so I'm very, very interested in, you know, the idea that you are looking to saying housing associations, if we had more housing associations with the private rentals, then surely they would be more open to actually taking on people like me, who private landlords still won't touch with a barge pole because I've been homeless.
Thank you, Alicia. I mean, one of the points I wanted to raise from the few points that come from the chat, because so much of this often is about trust, just before I bring in Sally. So there was a conversation that I've kind of collaborated between Paul, Emma and Alicia. The issue for me is the current negative perception of supported housing provision to assist people and families from the homelessness situation, hence the introduction of future national standards to improve the supported housing sector. There was a point made, I worry about the ability for tenants to sustain contracts. Now, since the way allocations are done, there's no ability to place people where suits the need of the community. I'm not sure what the answer is, but this is causing a lot of problems which many people are uncomfortable talking about. Problems arising from tenant-on-tenant abuse, often the result of tenants with very different unaddressed needs being housed in the same places. And the reason I'm bringing those up is so much of this is about perception. And it's just before I bring in Sally. Guy, I know a lot of the work you've mentioned there, particularly around shared ownership, which Louise had said they only do shared ownership houses are rented 2.5%. Overall, our shared owners have a really positive experience. It's the security of knowing they have a home for life where they want to stay. How much of this kind of work you're doing in terms of working in the private sector? I guess it's a two-part question. One is in terms of perception, in terms of how private rented sector can support something that's traditionally not for profit, because I think there's still sometimes a mindset around those, which is really important to address. But also actually the need and impact, I guess, that we're having in terms of looking at stuff like shared ownership on communities when there's such a negative perception, I guess, in the media around shared ownership, because as you say, it's mainly focused on those which aren't working rather than those which are.
Yeah. So I guess that what's the actual question there? Because like there definitely needs to be more work done on. I mean, I think we've come a long way with shared ownership. I'd like to recognize that first. We've come a hell of a long way. And it is a positive trajectory. There are horror stories, and I think there will still continue to be, because I think that there was just unfortunately a big a lot of sales that happened in London that and I think it is mainly a London thing, where people have bought in high-rise blocks, and we see it in the news all the time, and unfortunately that's what clouds the news. And rightly so. They are horror stories, and people have rightly signed up for something where they want to be supported into affordable access into home ownership, which is what shared ownership is all about. And I really think it's a phenomenal product, and the flexibility that it gives to people is fantastic. And then to kind of on the other point that you touched on, which is around private capital into the space. I mean, I'm very passionate about that. Savills has been like banding this stat around for a while now. It's like 23.5 billion over the next 5 years, and that was a year or two ago, of private capital that's going to come into the space. We've seen a lot of capital come in now. I think that's been really positive for the sector. It's allowed a lot of public-private partnerships to happen. The capital that's coming in is highly regulated capital in the main. I'll talk about new build affordable housing, because with the entrants that we've seen are the likes of Savills Investment Management, CBRE Investment Management, M&G, L&G, Pension Insurance Corporation have come in recently. So the kind of investors that are coming in are very well intended, very well governed, very well regulated, very deep pockets, and very importantly, have very good access to low cost of capital. And the reason why housing associations were historically so good at being able to solve the problem is because they were able to borrow money at very, very low rates. We've obviously seen rates increase significantly over the last few years since Liz Truss came in. And unfortunately, housing associations haven't been able to borrow at the levels that they could a few years ago. So this came at a really, really good time for the sector, that well-intended, well-governed institutions with access to low cost of capital have come in and they've invested a lot of money into the space. LGPS money has put a lot of money into these institutions as well, pension funds, insurance money. So I think that's been a really, really positive step. They're really, really good partners of ours. We work with pretty much all the names that I just mentioned there, or hope to in the coming kind of months and years. So that they are, I think that's been really, really positive, and I would definitely welcome more and more of that. And I think that without that, we'd be in a way worse position now than and I think that the trend will hopefully continue, and more investment will go into the space. I talk about it a lot, but there's probably very few asset classes, especially real estate in the UK, definitely no real estate in the UK that I'm aware of, where the supply and demand disparity is so great. There's no other asset class where you have millions of supply, of demand and relatively no supply. Like it's a huge chasm there, and you can't make huge you know, it's not there to be it's not a sector to be bled, which is a great thing. It's about how can you do this sustainably? How can you do it for impact? How can you generate, ultimately modest returns, but generate really positive social impact? And I think that it is really important that the people who are in the sector are generating profits, because those profits are then going to be reinvested and are going to generate more and more capital into the space. So it's about how can you do it sustainably, and the names that are coming into this space in a significant way are very well governed, very well regulated. So really welcome it, and I think it's been phenomenal for the sector, and will continue to be over the coming years.
Thank you, Guy. And I agree. I think there's a huge space for those who are trying to do it in the right way. And obviously, I don't bring many for-profit housing providers or housing associations onto the platform, because unfortunately there are some out there that aren't doing things. You mentioned there about profits coming through that aren't investing it back in and are just trying to, and living in Birmingham, particularly in the supported housing space, there was an awful lot of it a few years ago. It's got much better, but hearing what you're doing through HSPG is much better. And Paul had mentioned in the chat, improving void turnarounds has to be part of the solution. Of 4 million homes, about 5% become void each year. 200,000 homes, minimising the time the homes lay empty has to be a benefit. But the public sector can't do that alone, and it needs things like what HSPG are doing if it's ever going to succeed in that. I'm going to bring in Sally. Sally, good to have you with us.
Hi, Matt. Thanks very much. And sorry, I haven't been able to join recent ones. So on the new build side, and in terms of development, what we're doing in London Borough of Ealing is acquiring new homes off the shelf. So you mentioned earlier about the Liz Truss budget and the change to interest rates causing a lot of people to pull out of the market. Well, a number of homes that were under construction in our borough were stalled as a result of this. So we have now utilised the not great borrowing that we can get hold of, but it's better than it used to be 2 years ago, and GLA grant to acquire these. So I'm in the process. Hopefully by the end of August, we'll have acquired 300 since May. So that is one solution, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to the over 8,000 households we've got on our waiting list, some of whom are in temporary accommodation. We have tried using this formula to buy homes that we can specifically use for temporary accommodation, but the rules seem to be against us. Grant rates we get are slightly lower, which is a bit bizarre. We hold them in the general fund, which is fine. However, the expectation is that we don't hold them in the general fund for more than 10 years, but yet we're investing in something that is solid brick and mortar, which should have at least 60-year life. So we've got this bit of a conundrum here that I haven't managed to solve, partly because I've been concentrating on buying the other ones for social rent. And so instead of the blocks, the 110 we were going to buy for temporary accommodation, it looks like I'm probably going to end up buying half of those for social rent only. which doesn't solve our temporary accommodation solution and the £1 million a month that we're spending, or more than £1 million a month we're spending on TA. So if anyone's got any solutions to how we can change that, or put some pressure on the rules being changed so that we can actually purchase blocks like that for temporary accommodation, that would be amazing. The challenge we've got is getting the funding for the floating support, and that's been mentioned already as well. So yeah, but there is stuff happening, but it might not be quite as good as we want it to be.
Have you explored modular housing with and
having the land to put it on? We don't have. We don't have. And we experimented with 3 types of modular housing for TA in the last 10 years. Shipping containers, and which did not go down well. It went well politically, not now. But the lived experience in those hasn't been great. We've worked very closely with RCKA architects, who have worked with Roll-Along, and if anyone's been in London in the last 6 months, you may have seen their demo unit in February outside the building centre. But yeah, again, we haven't got the land to put that on, and the extra overcosts of connecting up to services and making sure we've got the services available is also a challenge. Our additional challenge in our part of London is a lack of electricity capacity on the grid, because it's been hoovered up by all the data centres along the M4 corridor. Don't even go there. Welcome to my world. Thanks, Matt.
No, thank you, Sally. Sharon, we've not heard from you yet. I'd love to bring you in.
Well, thank you, Matt. Well, firstly, I suppose just to state the obvious, and because I'm here from representing Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance, I feel always like I have to say, just to promote somebody mentioned about the housing alliances, housing associations and local authorities working together, which is so important. We've seen kind of good work that we know that one of the leading causes of homelessness amongst women is domestic abuse, and we've seen evictions being prevented by effective working together, where eviction was going to happen with a housing association that actually managed to prevent that, and help to rehouse the perpetrator and keep people. So keeping people in their homes is one thing, which I always have to say every time I'm here, so apologies for that. And then just also, I suppose I have a query about that, because, you know, I'm really saddened, Alicia, that, you know, people weren't offering you tenancies when you were looking, because I also see the other side of that in my private life. I know people, and I know that's probably unusual maybe, that my own family members and people that have got properties that or flats that not selling, they want to actually rent them out. They only want to cover their mortgage. They're not looking to make a profit. But, you know, as somebody mentioned here, with the renters' rights bill coming in, which we welcome, we want that in. But we're seeing, I've registered for London Forum to see what's happening, people exiting the market. So that's going to be reducing that stock. And I suppose I'm just really interested in what's been presented here today. Is there more that for people like that who genuinely do want to rent out their properties, but are absolutely terrified that they're going to get landed with fees for any kinds of things? They're genuinely quite worried. What could they do to work with their local authorities? It sounds like this is brilliant what you're doing, with HSP, but I'm not sure if that's working across the country. What can people do, landlords like that, do to try and help when they do want to lease their properties to people who don't have a lot of money, might be on benefits, but are terrified of being landed with fines that are going to make them have to sell up and they can't pay?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's how can we provide a platform or some form of function to partner landlords and housing providers? That's basically what we're talking about. As much as possible, housing providers don't want to sign incredibly long leases because they don't know, like, where's the local authority support going to come from in terms of referrals and and budget from the finance perspective. But there are definitely lots out there that know, okay, I can make this work for the next 2, 3, maybe even up to 5 years. They can get confident with, you know, with the current state of play. I think it's genuinely just one. I think that unfortunately there's still a negative stigma, and landlords would rather be like, I'd rather give my property to a family rather than actually understanding, well, I have a lot more security with a proper housing provider, and I'm doing good in the world. So I think that there's an education piece there, but I think that ultimately it's about how do you bring those two functions together. As I mentioned, we've got a management consultancy part of our business where we're really trying to do that. We manage 2,000 properties on behalf of landlords, local authorities, RPs, housing providers. So we're just, you know, we're trying to grow that. Our aim is to try and get that to 10,000 over the next few years. But again, it's still just a drop in the ocean. It's probably, I think, a big education piece would be agents. Lettings agents. You know, ultimately, if you're a landlord, you want to let your property, you go to a lettings agent. So I think that, you know, as a housing provider, as a support provider, what I would be doing if I was going to be running a housing support provision is I'd be going to my local agent and I'd be saying, you know, or with HSPG together, and saying, you know, how can I let my property to your landlord? This is the standard that I keep my property to. You know, if there is any damage, but this is my track record, but you can come and see my properties, see the work that I'm doing, see the quality that and how well it's managed. This is how often we're checking the properties way more often than anyone else would be if it's if it's privately managed. So that, you know, there's an education piece, and I think that's how I would do it. Is, you know, lettings agents are obviously a really big port of call. But yeah, I mean, if I would say that definitely have a chat with people in our team as well. If you're a landlord or if you're a housing support provider and you want to be able to grow your business, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create more of those partnerships. We're trying to remove the stigma, and demonstrate that if and when you do this properly, you're able to generate attractive returns and positive social impact. And that confluence of those two things is hopefully everyone's sweet spot.
Thank you very much indeed. And where are we going? Sorry, Sharon, go on. Have you got anything you'd like to?
No, I'm just going to say thank you. That's really helpful. And I think a lot of people are maybe not wanting to grow their portfolios. They just want to have one property. They want to just keep it, you know, and rent it, just like cover their costs, and it be a social, you know, for altruistic kind of reasons, which I suppose maybe that's a bit unusual, but I certainly know lots of people that would like to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to be in touch with them, I guess.
Thank you very much indeed. And where we're going to the last couple of minutes, I'm going to quickly try and summarize some of the points in the chat and then go to Guy for final thoughts, because this is, I mean, we could have easily had another hour here, Guy, I think it's fair to say. So there was a conversation that went on between Sue and Alex, also some points raised. Affordable rent is not affordable. Then the issue of lack of money, you can't afford to heat your home in a cost of living crisis and the knock-on effects that come with it. Apparently, I was speaking to an MP. They're going to consult on reforming Section 106, but no date as of yet. Work is underway with the government. And Alex has said, I've been banging on about RPs being given grants to purchase private and pre-council stock back to the Ombudsman panel for the last 3 years. So it's good to hear that it's maybe starting. There's a really interesting debate, which is potentially a whole nother email, a whole nother roundtable around what's more important: building energy, getting homes energy efficient and warm, or fixing homelessness and just getting people into homes. And that debate's really kind of highlighted quite proficiently in the chat today. Paul had said, oh no, discussed that one, sorry. Edwina said 295,000 recorded homeless, 700,000 recorded empty homes in England. We must be doing more. Jamie, as a nation, we're living both below and to the side of our aspirations. We want to be better for more people in more ways than we are now, both at scale and for those at risk of getting lost in the gaps. That's the below. The side aspect is that our focus becomes on doing the ineffective more efficiently and still wondering what we're missing. Are we trying to be too much to too many at the same time for whatever reason? What does the bravery needed to lay this foundation look like? An absolute imperative point. Emma, an organisation in Wales are looking at forming a sister company to utilise empty homes as a private organisation to relive some of the constraints of financial impact from standards for social housing, but offer the same services. And then Ben, has mentioned some of the social commercial balances that you have at HSPG, where in a lot of developments you'll have commercial units underneath, and that will help generate money, which will then lower the rents and the partnerships that can go on there. Guy, just a quick one for you in terms of final thoughts and in terms of wrapping up today, and how people might want to follow up the conversation if they're able to.
Yeah, I guess it's just really want to hit home. The scale of this problem is vast, especially in the key, the densely populated areas of the country. 1 in 50 Londoners are homeless. I think 1 in maybe 30 kids, which is basically the equivalent of 1 in every single class in school. The stats are phenomenal. There's a lot of work to be done. And for me, it's all about partnerships. I think it's phenomenal. I definitely saw almost maybe up to 100 people here today, which is just credit to you, Matt, and credit to all the people that have come online this morning, because a lot of people clearly are passionate about wanting to make a change. The way that this gets solved is through building partnerships, and from those partnerships we can create stable homes, create really high quality support, and everyone has to play their part. The local authorities, all the providers, all the landlords. It's all about us playing our part, and from there, that's where we can develop our communities. That's where we can, hopefully have people that will flourish and be fulfilled in their homes. So, yeah, how can they reach out to me? LinkedIn's always a really good place. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so it's Guy Horne, LinkedIn. Our website is super old, so I don't know. We're going to be updating it, but when you're trying to solve the homelessness crisis, you don't have too much time worrying about your blurb on the website. But there are some bits on the website there's places to get in touch, and there's various people as well who people might want to reach out to more specifically around housing support, for example. We're always hiring. To make this work, we need to grow our team. We need really passionate, well-intended people who understand how the problems that we have and are really passionate about solving them. So we're always looking to hire and grow our team. So whether it's yourself or people, we always list our roles online, and Matt's been really great in helping us support there. We've got a list on our careers page somewhere on our team page. So yeah, we really welcome continuing this conversation. It's been amazing to also hear from you guys as well, so thank you for being brave and putting your hands up and actually coming on to speak. It's been really good to hear from you guys, and would love to follow up with you specifically. So please add me on LinkedIn. And if you want to have any conversations there, I'm super open to that, and would love to see where they could leave and build those partnerships to develop our communities together.
Thank you very, very much indeed. And thank you, Guy. Thank you to HSPG for coming on today. Thank you to Alertcall and CMSG for sponsoring the roundtable in 2025. And I look forward to seeing you all at a future event. But for now, thanks, Guy, and thanks everyone for coming on. Cheers.